What's up, my people? Hope you guys doing okay. I want to read a little something from Psalms 119. We've been in that for like forever, but I'm going to read a little something. It says, verse 147, I prevented the dawning of the morning and I cried. I hoped in your word. My eyes prevented the night watches that I might meditate in your word. Hear my voice according to your loving kindness, O Lord, and quicken me according to your judgment. That's basically what I want to read. I found this very interesting because it's talking about how he would not even proceed to do nothing, even though the day was dawning, even though it was nighttime. Dude just be praying straight up. He just be praying to the Lord straight up because he definitely desired that he would be delivered from any kind of bad thoughts in his mind turning towards wickedness. And this is a king speaking who's in charge of everybody. Responsibility is a huge thing. And when you've been put on a burden of responsibility to keep a clean heart before the people and to do the right thing humbly is a very, very, very heavy burden to bear. This brother realized that. So what he did was he pretty much took on that responsibility, and he kept on staying in supplication to the Lord, realizing there's something greater than himself. He looked towards that. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. As you go ahead, you may be someone who's actually setting the example for some other people around you, influences, whatever, that you try to take that seriously, your responsibility seriously, trying to live honestly, and also to be able to show, you know, in your actions, not so much in your words, showing your actions, uh, that tone that is necessary for other people to look towards, so that he can say, "Hey, that's a right way to do about things." That you give off that positive vibe, that people could rely on that as an example to say, "Ah, this is possible." Then doing it honestly, or doing it this way or that way. You know what I mean? All right, let's get into what we're going to talk about today. It's a little bit more trivial than other times, so let's get into it. And it has to do with Batman v Superman and the comics. I find this really cool, so I just decided to do this. This is more trivial stuff. This is not heavy duty. This is just more fandom. So if you guys like fandom and stuff, this is gonna be it's gonna be interesting. All right, so in Batman v Superman, we see that the number on top of the police car in Batman v Superman, the number on the police car here is 224. So I did a little homework on that, and Batman comic number 224 that you see right here in the corner. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. There you go. That's good. That's good. Pull that down there. Yeah. Batman comic number 224. It was titled Carnival of the Cursed. Okay. It happened in New Orleans. So this number actually sends us back to that comic. And what's interesting about that is there's some similarities between that comic and the story of that comic and the story of Batman v Superman. So Zack Snyder took, again, using numbers and stuff. You can literally, the dude loves Easter eggs and sending you to comics. He literally has the storyline of a Carnival of the Cursed and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. They really do harmonize in many ways. So let me just break down what the story is about. So the story is about this jazz musician. Okay, hold on a second. Sorry about that. I thought I did screen share. Didn't I do screen share? Apparently not. Okay, I'm in screen share now, right? Everybody can see it? Okay, so I was saying, and I'm going to go back to it. I thought I hit screen share. Apparently I didn't. Now I'm here. You guys can see this. All right, so in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, there is this police patrol car. And we get to that scene where Gotham City is playing Metropolis, and the police are watching the match in their police car on TV. And we find out that there's a report sent in over the phone to the car, and then the car pulls off. And as the car's pulling off, we see the number 224 on the car, which is here. Okay. And it pulls off, and then when we pan out the shot, we see they're in Gotham City Harbor, and they're heading around to the housing areas near to there. Okay, so number 224 actually sends us to Batman issue number 224, which was in 1970, August edition. It was 15 cents at the time, as you can see all here. And that literal comic was titled Carnival of the Cursed. Okay, Carnival of the Cursed. And in it, a jazz musician, a famous jazz musician, was murdered. And we later learned that that jazz musician was murdered so that they could actually get his trumpet from him, his famous trumpet. And the reason they wanted to get that trumpet, we later find out in the comic, is because the trumpet has information on it. It has to do with, and let me read the comic itself. So here they are, the guy was murdered, so they have a funeral for him in New Orleans. And these guys, they come through again to try and steal the trumpet there. And Batman blocks them from stealing the trumpet, okay? They bury the trumpet along with the dead musician. So you see his grave there, and they bury the trumpet with him. And these, villainous people, they go on to dig up the guy's grave. And the reason that they want to dig up the grave, or the person who wants to access the grave, his name is Murdoch. Murdoch wants to access the grave because, as he explains, I discovered that the cornet's first owner, Moose Burton, visited Bayou Country just before he died. He told a lady friend in Kansas City he had found oil there, and that he scratched a rude map on his horn. Then he was struck by a car. On his deathbed, Moose gave the cornet to Blind Buddy, apparently without revealing its secret. So apparently this guy, Murdoch, who actually you're going to learn he's kind of horribly deformed, and he goes by the name Moloch. He thinks that he can get the cornet, get the information from the cornet, and therefore be able to find the oil. Okay, so it's a kind of a MacGuffin, as we say. And so the guy gets the cornet, and then Batman steals the cornet from them. He comes down and steals the cornet from Murdoch just before he can get access to the cornet. Now that's interesting because that has this very similar parallel to the kryptonite in Batman v Superman. So both in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and this story here, which is it's called Carnival of the Cursed. In both, we have a MacGuffin, which in this case would be kryptonite in BvS, and here would be the cornet. There's a MacGuffin which is dug up. So in Batman v Superman, the kryptonite was dug up. It was dug up underneath the sea. So a guy came down and pulled off the rock, and it was unearthed by LexCorp. And this is the guy that was working for LexCorp. He broke it open. He realized it had kryptonite in it. And then Batman stole the kryptonite, if you do remember. So I found that very interesting. And then there's more to the story, which both stories share. But in short, this deformed guy who had super strength, and it was very strong, very quick, who is known as Moloch, who he faced off against Batman. And eventually, in the end, Moloch gets apprehended, and the trumpet is destroyed. So even if he wanted to, he couldn't access the information on the trumpet in the end. Well, it so happened that one of the friends of the guy who was murdered, whose name was Max, he was abducted. They abducted Max. All right. And so Batman had to go to the harbor. Sounds familiar? He had to go to the harbor and rescue Max. And he ended up getting knocked out, and they chained him up, and he escaped. And he was able to free Max. And while he was freeing Max, he said, I want you to, they made me tell what? Where Blind Buddy's horn is, how we buried it with him. They said they were going to dig it up. And you hear, ahoy, here's the Coast Guard. And ahoy, ahoy was what Lex Luthor also said in BvS. But very interestingly enough, the guy who was Max, who was Buddy's friend, they didn't know, the guys who came to steal the stuff didn't know that Max had buried Buddy's cornet with him. And so they interrogated him, and he coughed up the information. What's so very similar to Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice here is that, one, there was also a hostage situation of abduction of people near the Gotham seaport or Gotham Harbor. All right. And one of the MacGuffins, or at least the associated MacGuffin that was associated with the kryptonite, was a ship. The ship was known as, I don't know if you can see it here, but the White Portuguese. It's pretty small. Anyways, here's the funny thing about the whole thing. One, we end up seeing the people who abducted Batman, frees those people, and he interrogates the sex trafficker. You see the parallels between the two things, abduction and interrogation. So he interrogates the sex trafficker concerning the White Portuguese, okay, which is a ship. So not only is he on an area where there are ships, but again, a ship is the subject of the whole thing. And I just find these coincidental, interesting things. And that's where we first are introduced to the Batman, is interrogating the sex trafficker concerning the White Portuguese. So I just find that both films have some very similar storylines. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is Batman, he steals the kryptonite from Lex Luthor, and he uses it to try and kill Superman with it. These guys wanted the cornet for a different reason. They wanted to get rich, but at the end of the day, the kryptonite spear was used to kill Doomsday, but it was not used to kill Superman. And the cornet, which was supposed to find the oil, that was also not used to find the oil. So I find that just very interesting that these stories, though they are two different stories, have some merging plot lines and storylines. And so it's just interesting that the Easter egg that was referred to here, which is Batman comic book 224, it kind of merges with the story here. It kind of tells us, kind of reviews to us the story we're about to see, you know. So I just found that interesting for you guys, and that's basically my video. Let's see what you guys have in the chat section. If you guys have anything to say in the chat section at this present time, I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say in the chat section. All right. So let me get there really quickly and see if you guys have anything for me. And then I'm going to split after this. I'm going to do like a banana and split away. All right. So nothing in the chat section for me today. This is going to be a very short video. I just wanted to share this stuff with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that little Easter egg session there. I'm going to put it up also on social media, but you guys are the first to see it first of all. Don't know why I'm going to do a yawn all the time. Oh my God. Just want to yawn. I don't know why. Continuously. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Some of you are asking about my boxing channel. It's called What You Need. I haven't done anything on the boxing channel for a while, so sorry about that. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoy this. Trying to always talk about Christ in every situation. I try to share a little something with you guys. In this case, this was just nerd stuff. I mean, just kind of comparing BvS. I went and watched Man of Steel this morning and last night, and then I was watching BvS today, and some very interesting things inside of BvS. And so that's what I wanted to actually share with you guys before I go to work. Just trying to do some business contacts, but they didn't come through. So yeah, I'm going through the DCEU movies once again, enjoying them. I wish I had some higher quality stuff for the DCEU movies, but we don't have it, so it is what it is. Let's talk a little bit about some of the news and updates. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit about the news and updates for the DCEU. There's some things I noticed the WB is doing. It's almost as if they're trying to imitate Marvel. And I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. when I was looking at Man of Steel, and then I look at Batman v Superman, you know, I wanted to do a video on this hyperrealism versus fantasy, because I think a lot of people just don't get that. It's so weird. I mean, hyperrealism is all about trying to be as realistic to the real world as possible with fictitious characters, and trying to hyperrealism. For those people who don't know, you know what? Let me give you the definition of hyperrealism, because there's like a bunch of stuff I want to say about the DCEU, and I'm watching how events are turning, and I'm kind of concerned, but not really. But let me get into a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about. First of all, hyperrealism. What is that? Okay. Let's talk about hyperrealism. So hyperrealism is called visual arts. Let's get a definition for you guys. It's nice that you can just go and Google things. Hyperrealism is a genre of painting and sculpture resembling a high-resolution photograph. Hyperrealism is considered an advancement of photorealism by the methods used to create the resulting paintings or sculptures. Let me go into a little bit more about hyperrealism, because they may cover it in a better way. It's realism in art characterized by depiction of real life in an unusual or striking manner. An unusual or striking manner. Okay. Here's an example of it. Some experts say that such gaming hyperrealism is unlikely to make much of a difference. The disparity of size and the hyperrealism is astounding, and that is their first look. Hyperrealism. Hold on. Let me see if I can find some more definitions for you. It has to do with visual arts, and if you're paying attention to the interviews, you'd hear Henry Cavill talk about hyperrealism. You would talk about Zack Snyder. You would hear Zack Snyder talking about hyperrealism a lot. And Zack Snyder studied art and history. Let me see if I can find some more stuff here that defines it. And hyperrealism is a genre of painting and sculpture resembling a high-resolution photograph. Hyperrealism is considered an advancement of photorealism by methods used to create the resulting paintings or sculptures. The term is primarily applied to independent art movement and an art style in the United States and Europe that has developed since the 1970s. Okay, so an example of hyperrealism. You know what? Let me do a screen share so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay. I'll give you, so basically hyperrealism is like art that is imitating real life almost, but it looks a lot more striking and a lot more enhanced. So there's photorealistic paintings, which is basically a duplication of a real painting, but hyperrealism is much more striking. It's much more accentuated. Let me see if I can find it. Hyperrealism has its roots in the philosophy of Jean Baudrillard, the simulation of something which never really existed. As such, hyperrealists create a false reality, a convincing illusion based on a simulation of reality. For instance, a digital photograph. Hyperreal paintings and sculptures are an outgrowth of extremely high resolution images produced by digital cameras and displaying on computers. As photorealism emulated analog photography, hyperrealism uses digital imagery, and expands on it to create a new sense of reality. Okay, so what Zack Snyder was doing in, say, for instance, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, or Man of Steel, is he's using these really accentuated images to give you a false sense of reality. For example, in Man of Steel, the hyperrealism here is seeing Kal-El, you know, when he puts his hand down on the ground, you see all the dust and dirt start to circle around him as if his magnetic field is expanding and getting stronger before he blasts up into space. He's obviously manipulating the electromagnetic fields to be able to just repel off the Earth and speed up into space, right? And accelerate as well. Now, that gives you a sense that it's very real, that this can really happen, that this is absolutely real that you're seeing. But in fact, it's a false sense of reality. Whereas in theory, that should be able to happen. And we've actually done it with things like magnetic plates and so many different things we can do it with. While that is true, it would take someone being able to manipulate their magnetic fields. Now, of course, the thing is, he's Kryptonian, so based on that, his electromagnetic fields would be stronger and all of that stuff we know, because he's been in a world with a greater magnetic field, blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing, and this is easy. If you're a science fiction person, this thought will cross your mind. If you go on the moon, for instance, and you start walking on the moon, you're going to bounce up and down, because the moon has 1/8 the Earth's gravity. So you have to be wearing a very heavy suit to start with to keep yourself from just leaping off the moon. The second thing is that, is Superman so in control of his muscles that he can move around the Earth just like how we do? He should be bouncing all about the place. He shouldn't be in control of his muscles unless he's learned how to balance himself and use the minimal amount of effort so that he moves around the Earth like how we do, because he was born on the Earth, okay? Why I say this is because that's one of the flaws, if you were to think about it, in the Superman story. He has the potential to just leap way up into the air because the Earth's gravitational field compared to Krypton is about 1,000 times less than Krypton. So he doesn't even have to put in a lot of effort to leap very high. See what I'm saying? So if you think about, if you start to put these things into perspective scientifically, it starts to fall apart. Now, here's the question. So hyperrealism is trying to visually, because it's visual art, it's about paintings, visually fool your mind into thinking these things are real. And that's the idea that Zack Snyder was trying to paint before us. And so when we look at the science of, say, for instance, Batman v Superman, or even Man of Steel, or to a lesser extent, Justice League, because Justice League kind of does more fantastical things in it, has more fantastical characters in it. And while it's trying to be grounded through a science fiction to give us this false sense of reality about these things, you have to understand that if Zack Snyder had directed Justice League, I think it would be much more realistically grounded than when Whedon came in. He kind of made more of a fantasy sort of thing and kind of dispensation of reality. And then some of the characters moved like puppets coming down to the end, especially, I would say, from the moment of the Heroes Park scene to the end, the action sequences were not as crisp as before that. And again, that's Zack Snyder's work, and you can tell Whedon kind of had something to do with it, you know, the finishing touches of certain scenes, even if it was shot by Zack Snyder. So what you find is that, you know, if you're talking about the first half of Justice League, you would find that Zack Snyder did a fantastic job of grounding the characters into reality and giving us that hyperrealism. And why I say hyperrealism, because I think a lot of people do not know what hyperrealism is. Hyperrealism compared to fantasy, if you go and watch any Marvel film, any MCU film, even The Winter Soldier, there's a fantastical element that makes you feel it's fantasy. You don't feel like those ships in the sky. They don't feel like real ships in the sky. They feel like, you know, CGI ships in the sky. You know what I'm talking about. And somebody's imaginings. And that's a totally different picture to when scientists and people come on board and literally start studying things and saying, okay, this is the most realistic way to depict it, and literally mixing in real stuff with the CGI. And that's a totally different story to what you've seen in the MCU so far. The Winter Soldier was grounded on the ground. You look at certain sequences and certain things, it felt very grounded. But once you got to the sky part of it, it felt fantastical. And if I'm not mistaken, there was another storyline or another thing where Iron Man and they were in the sky as well. I can't remember where it is. I don't know if it's Age of Ultron or what. But again, it's very fantastical. So when you look at the MCU, they deal more with fantasy. They don't deal with hyperrealism, and they are not really into science fiction. They're more into magic. Even with the stuff they should be more grounded with science fiction about. I had this discussion with another guy, and he was saying, well, you know, the Hulk, he was formed by science fiction, and, you know, Iron Man was formed. Yes, but it was more magically explained. They tried to get you to buy into the fact that robots were making this robot. And they never really came back to, you know, the science fiction of it. They just had this robot interfacing with Iron Man throughout his movies. And they had him making stuff out of nothing, you know. I mean, some of the stuff was illogical. It was more magic than anything else. They weren't trying to explain every step, you know. Whereas with the case of Cyborg, for instance, we know he's a sort of alien technology. We could buy into that because it's okay, it's alien technology, you know. We don't know about normal technology and polymers of normal technology doing that, but alien technology, okay, we could kind of buy into that, okay, because we'd seen it on Krypton. We'd seen this alien technology on Krypton. I think that's the only place we really saw it. So it wasn't, you know, there was a precedent for it. But my point being, when you look at the MCU and their approach to things, it's more magical. They're more dealing with magical things. Even though they say, oh, we're introducing magic here. No, some of your stunt sequences and some of the things that you do with your characters and just the disproportionate way how their power levels work and so on, you can tell that it's magic more. It's not, you're not trying to really go with reason, and you're not really trying to follow logic or science fiction or anything like that. Wonder Woman had some fantasy in it where you had to dispense again from reality. Some of it was again illogical. So based on those things, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these movies. Now, why I said that is because hyperrealism is different to fantasy. And for those people who do not understand what fantasy is, and science fiction really is not dealing with fantasy. Science fiction generally tells you, well, this is what's going to happen next. Really good science fiction movies, at least. Fantasy is the faculty or activity of imagining impossible or improbable things. So that's why I said that, you know, when you're talking about the MCU, it's more fantasy. It's more what you would have desired to see as a little kid growing up, you know, seeing all these superheroes just kind of clash with each other. Nothing deep, nothing, you know, it doesn't matter what the science behind it is or what, you know, just put them together and clash them. You know, when you, I don't know, some of y'all, if you were kids, you had G.I. Joes or you had whatever. And a lot of things, kids don't really care about logistics and power levels and all that shit. They just put the characters together and clash them, you know, and let's just have a good old shebang. And that's it. That to me is what the MCU is. Even the last Infinity War there, to me, was just about putting characters together and clashing and having fodder for the villain. And that's not the approach the DCEU has. And that's the difference. And unfortunately, the DCU gets over-criticized for what they do. But if you look at the DCEU, it's definitely a lot more flushed out universe. And generally speaking, the universe follows certain rules. And what I like about it is it's not really Hollywood. you think of the MCU, it's all Hollywood. The way how they do their dialogue in between their scenes, the way how when they can't explain something, they crack a joke, that kind of thing. To me, that's all Hollywood. When you look at the DCU, at least up to what Zack Snyder had done, and even what David Ayer did with his movie, which was kind of chopped up. You can look at it in retrospect. It's still innovative as a film in the way it approached things, but it was chopped up. I would say that Zack Snyder, Patty Jenkins more kind of did the safe Hollywood thing. Some insert with the plot and the punchline way of relaying things was pretty good. But you know, it was more of a traditional storytelling way of doing things. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, Zack had set this template for hyperrealism. Patty took some of that and said, you know what, even though this is supposed to be a fantasy world, Themyscira, I want you to feel like this is a real world existing. Again, hyperrealism, trying to trick your mind into believing this is real. It's a false reality, no doubt about it. But you're not going to think it's a fantasy. You're going to feel like this is a real place on Earth. Now, I heard people, again, trolling the DCEU and saying, you know, Wakanda, that has to be a place, and we're going to go see. We all know. You just had to watch at Wakanda on the screen and realize that that was not a real place. You knew that was set design. Just like how Krypton did not feel like a real place, and you knew that was set design as well. And my point being this. You can tell when the MCU people troll off the DCU people. DCU people talked about independent filmmaking. Zack Snyder is, you can see, he's an indie filmmaker. Oh, we know about this little indie film by the Russo brothers, and all of a sudden, everything with the MCU is about indie film. Thor Ragnarok, the hottest piece of crap I've ever seen, was called an indie film, and so on. All right. Before that, nobody was saying anything about indie films. It was us highlighting BvS and how it was an indie film approach. And then all of a sudden, the trolls, the Marvel trolls, they come after in industry and so on. I even heard them on Collider video trolling and saying that. And they were laughing with a smirk because they knew that they were just trolling. They knew Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice was not only indie, but the theatrical cut was actually avant-garde in its approach, which is not seen or heard about in blockbusters. It's not seen or heard about in blockbusters. And these guys knew that. They knew it. But it's okay. Because we also know that Zack Snyder also had another approach to it, which is called international filmmaking. If you've ever watched a foreign film, those of you who've actually expanded yourself and actually watched foreign films for a change, if you've ever actually watched a foreign film, you realize that Zack Snyder also used some of those techniques in foreign filmmaking to incorporate in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the theatrical cut. And what I also loved and appreciated about Zack, which I think takes it to the next level in his filmmaking, was that Zack also incorporated elements that Tarantino, which people say, oh, that's sacrilege to say, but what Tarantino does in his movies, Zack also did in his movies. And I can show you tons and tons of examples of that. You know, you just look at Kill Bill, for example, which was a very interesting trilogy that Tarantino had, Duplicate, whatever it was. And you look at Django even, it's the same kind of thing. Tarantino has a certain style that he uses, Pulp Fiction, etc., where you go from one character to another, to another, to another, and there's an interwoven plot. That's the same thing Zack Snyder actually did with Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. And he cut it up a certain way. And I thought that was nice because it was kind of edgy. It was kind of rough on the edges. Again, an indie kind of feel to it that I loved and I enjoyed. And I heard people talk about, oh, you have to be schizo to do this. But they know it's high art that Zack did. They know this, all right? And they will try and cover it up. But it is what it is. Anyway, we're talking about hyperrealism. So you can see that the approach, and Zack Snyder said this, Henry Cavill said this, a whole bunch of people at the cast, both, whether it's Man of Steel or otherwise, they all said the same thing, which is that they were approaching this as if it was the real world. Like Zack had said, we're taking these fictional characters and we're going to bring them to your world. And you saw Warner Bros. Doing it with the Google and the online websites where you could go in and see about Lex Luthor and that kind of stuff. That was the approach that they were using. Now, having said all that, I want to come back to something else I want to say about what I'm seeing with the DCEU moving forward. And I don't know how I feel about it. I feel sort of strange about the whole thing because I don't know. I just feel very strange about it. And so for me to best talk about this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see what your opinions are. Don't worry, you guys can talk in the chat section right over there. You can leave your comments in the chat section, but let me just make my very brief comments on that before I get out of here and go and sell. Been trying to contact a certain guy who's supposed to ship goods to me today and can't get him for nothing. I've been trying a couple of days now, and dude just not responding. So we'll see what happens with that. But let's talk about that. So what I want to tell you guys about is the approach of the DCEU in the beginning was about hyperrealism. It was also about substance in storytelling. So they really approached, I thought, comic book movies in a sort of really wonderful, mature sort of way in which you would feel that those movies are real. And BvS was fantastic in accomplishing that. BvS made people actually feel that Superman was so real that you heard people actually get outraged by the story. It was very real. It struck people. It struck people on a nerve. It hit home. And that's why that movie to this day is still being discussed. All right. Nobody's discussing Civil War like that. Nobody's discussing Avengers, the first Avengers movie like that. No one. Because this movie touched on our world. It came straight to us. It was delivered straight to us and hit us in our teeth. People who were xenophobic in this country, people who are racist in this country, people who are, they judge people because of their background or culture. It hit them hard. They went into the cinema to looking for a Marvel flick where you get just fantasy, forget it, just a kick up, great kick up, and they got something more. And they felt spanked. They felt reprimanded. They felt the punitive action on them because Zack really reined it in hard. And then for those people who were into hero worship, Zack crushed that to the core when Superman was killed. So Zack really stepped on a lot of people's nerves, and a lot of people were angry with the movie. I remember I came out the cinema and this woman, she was like, Batman v Superman is a bunch of crap. They killed Superman in that movie. It's a crap. And I realized she worshipped Superman. She did not worship the ideals that Superman represented. And I think Zack stepped on her last nerve. And I was just so happy he did all those things because I really enjoyed the movie because for me, it was just so different. And that's why I went and saw Batman v Superman 10 times. I couldn't get enough of it. Again, as a Christian, I don't believe in hero worship. You know, where everybody says Almighty Zack Snyder or the Lord and Savior Zack Snyder or what, all this heresy that they say, you know, I'm not into that crap. You want to go worship Zack Snyder? Fine. I'm not doing that shit. Now, I'm glad about the content of what he does in his movies. I'm grateful to that. I'll always thank him for that, honor him for that. But I'm not going to worship his tail. He's just a human being just like you and I. And I could disagree with him on the drop of a dime as well. It's not a big deal for me. But for those people who hero worship and they like to hero worship, you know, people who hero worship all these superhero characters, well, their world came crashing down with Batman v Superman because Batman was on the brink of being morally bankrupt. And Superman was he was taking punishments throughout that movie. So those people who hated that, well, too bad for them. You know what I'm saying? Because Zack was about to give something deeper than just these icons. He wanted it to be something more. And I'm so glad he did that with Batman v Superman. And now, you know what I liked about Justice League? Even though it wasn't purely Zack's idea, Justice League flew in the face of all those people who they love to worship movies where it's sad and it's grovey and it's melancholic and the people are always dark-minded. And I just love that Justice League flipped that on its head, but yet kept the integrity of Batman, kept the integrity of Superman. And yeah, okay, Whedon had something to do with that, but it was going in that direction anyway. And I would love to see Zack's, that's why I said, release the Snyder Cut. I would love to see Zack Snyder's version of the movie, because I definitely believe, because all those little bullet points, Superman going back to the ship, Superman going to see Alfred, the fact that Superman saves the day and you see Clark and Bruce at the end of the movie and they're talking to one another tells me already that this movie was going to go the direction it was going in. It's just that a lot of stuff was cut out, and some other stuff that would have definitely added more depth to Superman, more depth to Lois Lane and so on. They removed that from the movie because they wanted it much more lighter and with more jokes and whatever. And so anyway, the point is that at the end of the day, unfortunately, some of the key things that link this movie together from the other two movies were cut out of the movie. We know this clearly. We know it from the deleted scenes we saw. These are facts now. And so that's why we want the Snyder Cut. But I got to say, at the end of the day, I still believe that those set of movies that we got early on in the DCEU are the set of movies that brought me to the DCU. Now, let's talk about post that. Let's talk about Wonder Woman movie. The Wonder Woman movie for me was more of an emotional movie. It had some interesting philosophy in it. It was linear. It wasn't too heavy on story and plot. It wasn't a plot-driven movie. And so as a result of that, it was good for what it was with the director, Patty Jenkins. But like I said to many people, and I still maintain, as much as Wonder Woman was a fantastic movie in its own right, it pales in comparison to Batman v Superman, Man of Steel. Those are, to me, better movies than Wonder Woman. Justice League is good because of, again, all the tying in that tied in different things. I would prefer to see Zack Snyder's version now moving forward and his cut of the movie. And so I'm hoping again that we can get his cut of the movie before the end of this year or early next year. But they definitely should release a cut of his movie out there. I want to see his cut of the movie, and that will lay that to rest. I will be happy when that's done. But I'm definitely with you guys on pushing for a Snyder Cut. I'm still going to push. Now, having said all of that, Suicide Squad was interesting as well. It gave us a different perspective and view on things that we didn't usually see. Hold on one second. Let me just see what's going on here. I'm sorry to have been interrupted like that. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I just had to step away. Family matters, business. Yeah. So basically, I was saying that that's what Zack Snyder brought to the table. Now, post this, we have Aquaman coming up, which I'm very excited about. We also have Shazam, and then we have Wonder Woman. Now, here's some of the things, though, I've been paying attention to, and I don't know how I feel about them. I'm going to be honest with you. Remember, I'm a big, grown guy. I got into the DCEU because of the substance that was in it and the sort of realism that's around it. It's you know, the realness of it. That's what really pulls me into the DCEU. But of late, I noticed the strategies that are being implemented remind me a lot of the strategies that the MCU is implementing. You know, the Russo brothers came and they, you know, were kind of making jokes about things coming forward in the future. And I see, you know, Sandberg with Shazam making jokes about things coming into the future. And then I'm looking at continuity, and I'm wondering, you know, there was somebody who put up an article, and I kind of agree with the article that why are you bringing back Steve Trevor? You know, I didn't understand that. I don't understand it. I don't understand. I'm gonna be honest with you. Just certain things I don't understand. But then again, Warner Bros. They do some stuff that you just don't understand. So I'm getting the feeling like Warner Brothers is trying to emulate what the MCU is doing, and I'm just it's so sad to me, because if you're emulating something that the MCU is doing, Warner Brothers, then you're just going to be generic. You're not going to be distinct from them. You're not going to define yourself. So if they're going to go down the road of that, they're probably going to lose a fan like me. They're going to lose me, because you have a nice, substantial demographic that was growing, that you can back you 100%, and you're really going to just throw that away to try to be like the MCU. I don't understand why you want to do something like that. That's the thing I don't understand. But the signs that I see, it seems to tell me that they're trying to head in that direction. They're trying to actually emulate what the MCU is doing. I just don't understand why you would want to do something like that. I remember one of the guys in my group, Justice League Unite, saying that, you know, what Jeff Johns and Zack Snyder were doing, I don't know why he said it that way, but whatever. Well, Jeff Johns and Zack Snyder was trying to do that, you know, Warner Bros. Is not going to go that direction anymore. They're going to go a different direction. It seems apparently that they may be doing that. I don't know. But it really leaves a sort of bitter taste in my mouth. I don't know. I am being maybe premature here. I'm hoping that they keep these adult themes and these sort of a mature approach to movies and a sort of realism, a hyper realism to the movies there, because I prefer the hyper realism approach than the fantasy approach to things. And I'm seeing like they seem to be moving in the direction of a fantasy approach. Now, Shazam, you would expect more fantasy than realism to some degree, because it's about magic. Not to say that you shouldn't keep some sort of realism to it. The world around there should be realistic. But that's what I see with Shazam. Now, there's, you know, the MCU has been praised ridiculously, more than any other Marvel universe. We have Fox as well. We have the Fox Marvel universe, and that has not been getting glowing reviews of late. They praised Logan, but quite frankly, they haven't really been praising the Marvel universe. And it's just because Logan was rated R. They even praised Deadpool, which is just one of the movies that I personally don't like. I don't like Deadpool. I watched a little bit of it. I just didn't like it. I never watched Deadpool to its completion because I just found it was a ball of crap as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people say metahuman, metahuman. I'm like, I don't care. It's stupidness. Its story sucks. It's not like this guy is psychotic or anything in his mind or anything like that. It's not like that. It's just about humor, and I'm not into that. You know, I think Legion's a better I think Legion television series is better than Deadpool, because it's psychological. Legion's psychological. He's a mentally unstable mutant. So I kind of like Legion much more. I would watch Legion any day, much more than Deadpool. I don't like Deadpool. I don't. It's crap. in my opinion. So why I say this is because I look at what the critics and the industry has been praising, and I'm assuming that Warner Brothers wants that praise as well, like how they got the raving praise for Wonder Woman. And I gotta be honest with you guys, that's just something I don't even give a damn about. I think that you have to step into spaces where you need to define yourself, and you have to be strong in that. And I think Warner Brothers is showing more and more that they don't have that tenacity or strength to follow through with the product that they have, which is why, and this is just a criticism on my part, they gather data and they try to change up Justice League, and that hurt them. They had a wonderful movie in Blade Runner, but Blade Runner wasn't advertised properly. That's why a lot of people didn't go to see Blade Runner 2049. They had some other knockout the park successes with their new cinema line, with things like Kong Skull Island and so on. And they're thinking that by bringing in a host of the directors from new cinema line, that they would have success. But I don't think that's how it goes. I think it's a partisan sort of game right now, and it's about, no, we don't want the DCU around. And the only way the DC is going to stay around is for the people who actually enjoy the movies to be able to see the kind of precedent that they've been basically setting out in motion. And I get the feeling that they're trying to go for more jokes. Even when I think about the Flash movie and the guys they hire from Spider-Man Homecoming to do that, and I'm thinking to myself, those guys, I mean, what are you trying to do with Flashpoint, or a Flash movie? And I don't particularly understand it. I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, it's just, to me, that is shooting yourself in the foot. Every time they've tried to go this light, campy direction with their movies, making them light and campy and hee hee ha ha, the fan base has continuously shut them down. And I don't understand why they do that. I mean, they did it with Tim Burton. They did it with Zack Snyder of late. They've done it with, and they've always failed. They took Schumacher. They failed with him. They brought on Bryan Singer. They failed with him, and they seem not to get the memo on these things. So that's the thing that gets me a little bit nervous. And I'm hoping that these people from Warner Bros. Did not tamper with Aquaman, even though I have a feeling James Wan he already said it's going to be swashbuckling, it's going to be an adventure, it's going to have humor, it's going to have those. So regardless of what, it's going to be what it is. And so, I mean, it's just what it's going to be. James Wan is going to get his vision on the screen. I do seriously believe that. And I think that Shazam will be, again, I don't know how edgy Shazam will be. I mean, assuming it's going to be edgy. But from what I've seen of Shazam, I kind of enjoyed watching it. So whatever they do with Shazam should be fine by me. Shazam is probably the most humorous of the DC characters besides Green Lantern. Green Lantern's been known for humor. The Flash has been known for some humor as well. So Lantern, Flash, Shazam, I mean, whatever they want to do with that. It is what it is. Shazam I mean, he's a magical character and he's a little boy. So, I mean, what can you say? So that's what I had to say to you guys. But it just kind of, unfortunately, I hate to do that and put that out there, but it just kind of bothers me a little bit. Seeing what exactly are they doing was what I'm asking myself. That's all. I'm not going to try and be negative about it too much. Even though obviously there are some negative thoughts going through my mind. But I did enjoy the DCU, and I've gone through those other movies. I particularly like Suicide Squad and there's of course a fan base for Suicide Squad, but I particularly like Suicide Squad for the unorthodox way how they approach these characters. I think it would have been a little bit more darker, and I think there would have been a little bit more oomph to it if they had gone the David Ayer route. But there are some things that would have missed. Some things would have hit and some things would have missed. So I think the theatrical cut's probably the best cut of it thus far. Now, the extended cut I saw was not as good as the theatrical cut, even though the extended cut did explain one or two things the theatrical cut did not explain. But I would have preferred, if they were going to do David Ayer's version, which I think they should still put out David Ayer's version if they're going to do that. I would have loved to see the scenes where they went up against the Joker and see what that had to do with anything, because it was advertised. So once again, I just wanted to put that out there about the DCEU and some of the things about the DCEU. I'm not quite sure I understand why Warner Brothers is trying to emulate the MCU. Why would you try to emulate that? It's like to me, it's like taking a couple steps backward. That's my personal opinion. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. But that's the only thing that I have to say about the DCEU. Of course, I don't know where they're going with it, so I have to see where they're going with it, and then it would make sense to me. But quite frankly, I would think that, you know, I would want them to keep that realism going. I would want them to keep movies which are not hee hee ha ha movies, you know, and jokes and jokes and jokes. I would want them to take the characters seriously. I would want them to crystallize the ideals of the characters and put those ideals in the forefront. Of course, these are just things that I, as a Christian, would love to see, so people could see the values in these characters. I think that's much more important than the actual characters themselves and people worshiping them. You know, I'm in a group. I'm in several groups, and I am in charge of several groups on the internet, and I find myself seeing people constantly sort of hero worshiping, and they're talking about these characters, but they're mostly worshiping the characters. So they do a lot of iconography and pictures of them, and I'm not really into that stuff, folks. If you notice, I don't just put up a picture of a character. I'm not a fan of the character like that. I'm a fan of what the character represents. You know why I'm a huge fan of Cyborg? Because of the idea of someone being in a situation where they're trying to resolve what they are as they evolve. And so, to me, that's the interesting thing about Cyborg, which is why I'm a fan of him. And I've read some of the comics. But it's not to say that I am interested in worshiping how Cyborg looks and Victor Stone and what he's going to do next, like this hero worship that people do with their stars or with popular people out there. You want nutritive value in everything you do, folks. What nutritive value? Go back to Psalms 119, and it says, I prevented the dawning of the morning, and I cried. Why? Because, see, day after day is not as important as the values that you have. And if there's anything you want to worship the values that you have, that you need to get. Love, joy, peace, patience, generosity, kindness, humility, faith, goodness. You know, worship values. Be a servant of those things. That's what I'm trying to say. A lot of people want to be, you know, they want to, you know, want to be wealthy like this guy, or they want to, you know, want to have influence like this guy, want to be famous like this guy. But touch on to that, the success of this person. That's cool, but the values are more important than those things. So, you know, that's what I like about these movies. That's why these movies drew me to them. That's why I watched these movies multiple times. It's the values in them. I think that's the thing that I like. That's the thing I hold on to. And I like that these movies, at least they're not your typical Hollywood movies. It's not your typical stuff that Hollywood says. Empty stuff these days. I also like that they treat these comic book movies as if they're some other genre of movie, a normal genre of movie, as if it's, you know, it's real situations, real world, you know, real people. You feel that, again, hyperrealism is the difference, how they treat the characters. It's not like some great Hollywood character. Oh, yeah, I'm up on stage now. Look at my presence. Look at me. It's not like that. And I like that. I appreciate that. To me, that's real acting. Anywho, on that note, I hope you guys have a great one. Have a great day. And always seek the things which are invisible to touch and hold like that. The intangibles, love, joy, peace, these things. Hold on to those things. Let's try and build some community today. You guys have a good one.